All right, warriors, hi. Coach Christy here, back with Sher Nyquist again. And in our last video, we talked about subconscious drivers. So we identified what those are, why they may come about in our lives. And in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about, well, how do we get to the point where we're able to identify those? Because sometimes they are so deeply seated in our minds that we don't even necessarily recognize that they're there and getting in the way of our progress. So how can we identify those things? And from there, once we've identified them, how can we start to deal with them and get them kind of out of the way of us making progress in different parts of our lives? So share a couple of things, a couple of ways that you could suggest to us that we might be able to identify those.
Right. So I think one of the things to watch for is when you're going through your life, like maybe you find yourself at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you just find yourself agitated. And you might even say to yourself, I woke up feeling good. My morning was good, but something is really eating at me.
No reason not to feel good still.
Yeah, like I don't know. And that's a great time to start looking for subconscious drivers, because something, if at 1 o'clock you felt great and at 3 o'clock you notice that you're really agitated, maybe you feel anxious or you're feeling angry.
Okay.
And it's not because you're hungry, you know, or
You're
something
not
like that. Because it's always good to look at that too, because
sure.
sometimes it is that.
Yep.
But you might want to then just start tracing back and thinking, okay, what happened that triggered something in me? And then it's like, oh yeah. And it can be anything from I was driving and somebody, flipped me off, or somebody said something, or, tracing back and figuring out that moment when you were triggered.
Okay.
And sometimes we can't even identify it because, interestingly enough, one of the biggest triggers are from smells.
Okay.
And it's very difficult for us to even realize that we smelled something that triggered us. So we can't always identify the trigger, but once you get into the habit of starting to look for those things, it's often you will find them. And so let's just say that, you were driving and somebody got mad at you for something that either you did or they thought you did. And
as I drive like a granny in the snow, not gonna lie, happens.
So, as they zoomed past you, you glanced over and you could tell they were yelling at you, and maybe they flipped you off or something. And, and all of a sudden something happened in you, right? I'm just making this up. I don't know that it did, but it's that kind of a situation where then all of a sudden something starts eating at us, and we start feeling a certain way. And this is the same way that we always feel when that kind of a situation happens, right? When we feel that somebody's mad at us or that we did something wrong, right?
Sure.
And
somebody's judging us, maybe.
Yeah. And so and then you start to recognize where that's the way that you always start to feel in that kind of a situation.
Sure.
That's the perfect thing to start with.
Okay.
It's like, now you have identified a trigger. When somebody makes me feel like I have done the wrong thing, or when somebody is mad at me because I did do the wrong thing, whatever it is, it's like, okay, that's a trigger for me. It always sends me spiraling. It makes me lose my confidence. I can feel agitated for hours or maybe even a day or two because of that kind of thing.
Sure.
So now you've identified a trigger, right? That feeling of, let's just use the words, I did something wrong. That's a huge one for a lot of people.
Sure.
I did something wrong. Now they're mad at me. I was so stupid. Why did I do that? If I could only go back, right? So that trigger of I did something wrong. So once you identify it, then it's like, okay, what do we do about it, right? How can we make a change so that, in our brain, it's like the needle is in the groove of the record, and it's always going to play the same phrase over and over and over until we get that needle into a different groove. So that's what we're talking about here, is how can we disrupt the trigger so that next time it happens we can do it a little bit differently than we've always done it, right? And so, and I think there are a lot of tools that we can use right in the moment breathing, just some really deep breaths from the diaphragm. In 60 seconds, we can actually change the chemistry in our brain. So, I mean,
it's amazing.
Yeah. So, I mean,
we all have 60 seconds to spare.
Exactly.
Right?
And you can even do it when you're driving,
sure.
or, that's an easy one that's so underutilized because we don't understand the significance. That I like to really tell people, you literally change the chemistry in your brain from just taking 4 really deep breaths. I mean, it's awesome.
We've talked about that at the dojo here, and I think for those people who took the time to practice that, you would agree that there is, if nothing else, a huge sense of calm that comes about you when you're doing that. And then there really are actual kind of physical changes that happen when you take the time to really focus on those breaths.
Exactly, yeah. So it's super significant. And there are a lot of tools like that. Breathing, journaling, talking with a friend, and we were just talking about journaling a little bit ago, about how effective it is and how our brain, different things happen in our brain when we write versus when we talk versus when we just think about something over and over and over. So the worst thing you can do is just think about something over and over and over and stay stuck there.
Right.
Or not identify the triggers, or not deal with the triggers once you have identified them, right? So if you've identified a trigger that is something that comes up for you, I think one of the best things to do is start to journal about it. So again, back to that thing of, I did something wrong. And then I think just to start kind of almost like a rant. No editing, no perfect sentence structure. It's like, some people call it a shitty first draft, right? It's like, excuse the language, but it's like you're not writing this perfect thing. It's like you're just purging. So
kind of that flow of consciousness writing that we learned about when we were in school, just kind of letting it all go, let it flow, no matter what form it comes out in.
Exactly. And it's powerful for, again, our subconscious mind, because it allows us to put process there. So to just start writing whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, and just letting it flow. And whether that's, 3 sentences or 3 pages, it doesn't matter, but just write until you're done. And you don't even have to go back and read it or analyze it or anything. Just the process of doing the writing is super powerful. And then, if you come back to it at some point and write a little more about it and write a little more about it, it's like then you can start to really maybe identify when is the first time I remember feeling, wow, I did something wrong and somebody got mad at me, or I did something wrong and it proves that I'm worthless, right?
Sure.
You can start to peel the onion and getting a little bit deeper into what's really going on there. And the more of them that we identify of what's really going on, then we can start the process of bringing in changes and doing things differently than how we have always done them in the past.
Sure, because as you and I discussed before, that we have this tendency in life to have a situation, have a problem, so to speak, and we take the same approach every time we deal with it.
Yeah.
We do the same things over and over again, somehow expecting a different result, which is, as you've heard, is the definition of insanity.
Right.
Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting something different to happen. So,
yes,
so taking a different approach, a different look at those situations in order to move forward.
Yeah. And it's almost like you're intercepting, right? Or transecting, right? If you always go this way, like consciously, intentionally say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make a turn here. I'm going to turn a corner. I'm going to do it differently so that I can have new awareness of what's going on so that I can make real changes.
Sure.
Yeah.
The other thing you mentioned was talking with somebody else, and that could be a therapist, somebody who's trained in listening and kind of assessing what might be going on. But I would say that we can get a lot of value out of talking with just a friend or something like that. And as I was talking with Sher earlier, for me, there have been a lot of times where I've sat down and talked with somebody and they don't even necessarily have to really say anything,
Yeah.
but going through that process of listening to myself state what's going on
Yeah.
brings a whole different level of awareness. So the same thing with journaling, writing, or speaking it just has a completely different impact on that process than just sitting down and thinking about it.
Yeah. Again, sitting and thinking about it, we all do it, but it's the worst place to stay because we just go around the block
Yeah.
time after time after time, right? It's like things like journaling or talking with somebody, or there are all kinds of different tools that you can really use. Like EFT tapping is one of the things that I do with people.
Okay.
Those are the things that help us start to peel the layers.
Sure.
So it's so that we're not just doing the same thing over and over. It's like we get a little deeper and a little deeper, because what's the goal here? The goal is inner transformation, so that we can have success in areas of our life where we didn't get that success before. That's really what we're reaching for, is overcoming the barriers so that we can get the kind of success that we want.
I think that analogy of the onion is perfect because, it makes you stop and think that, like other things in life, this isn't something that's going to happen right away. You're not going to rip the onion apart and suddenly go, oh, I completely get it.
Yeah.
This is the problem and this is what I have to do to deal with it.
Yeah.
It's a process. It's a peeling back a little bit at a time, and through that process of taking the time to peel back those layers, ultimately coming to the discovery of really what's at the root of that situation.
Yeah. And it is ongoing. I mean, I got my first mentor when I was 13 years old, and really started peeling layers then. And
Okay.
now, many years later, I still work
like
with
5
the
years
coach.
later, right?
I still have my own coach. I always like having a mentor in my life so that I can be peeling back more layers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's always something more to
It's
discover.
process,
isn't it?
right? Exactly.
Yeah,
And I'm getting better and better all the time.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank
Right?
you so much, Sher.
Yeah, you bet.